Rain slams Lagos like 1,000 hands beating on iron. In the marble foyer of the Adeyemi mansion, security drags open the gates as a black SUV fishtails to a stop. A gaunt woman in a threadbare wrapper staggers out, Amaka, eyes blazing with the last of her strength. Behind her, a young man in a wheelchair, Tunde locks his shaking hands to the tires, refusing to be turned away. On the balcony above, Chief Samuel Adeyemi, once the city's golden king, stares down, knuckles white on the rail. Beside him, Grace Okoro's smile is a knife. "You don't belong here," she hisses. Thunder answers. Tunde lifts a folder fat with Truth's hospital charts, transfers the name of a driver who was paid to miss a turn. For one breathless heartbeat, even the rain holds. Father Tunde says, voice steady, "Look at what your love cost us." Lightning splits the sky, the gate swings wider, and the past walks in. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there then. Subscribe to join our African Stories family. Long before the storm that shook Lagos, the Adeyemi name was a symbol of power and prestige. Chief Samuel Adeyemi, a man molded by ambition, had built an empire from nothing: real estate, logistics, even oil contracts that reached foreign hands. To the world, he was a self-made legend. To his wife Amaka, he was once just a dreamer with dusty shoes and a heart full of promises. She had stood beside him when they lived in a single-room flat, counting coins for dinner. Her love was the quiet kind, the kind that didn't need gold to shine. Together, they had one son, Tunde, born on a humid night, thick with thunder. From the start, the boy seemed touched by light. At 8, he could fix broken radios and calculate profits faster than his father's accountants. His teachers called him the boy with two brains. But to Amaka, his greatest gift wasn't his mind, it was his kindness. He shared his lunch with classmates, repaired the housemaid's son's shoes, and sat by the gatekeeper's daughter when she was sick. "You'll change this world, my child," Amaka whispered as she watered the hibiscus by her window. Yet beneath the glitter of success, Samuel's heart was beginning to rot with a single thought: "I need more sons." His business partners, mostly older men with wide bellies and louder laughter, mocked him during meetings. "One heir, Chief Adeyemi, you must build a tree, not one branch," they joked. He laughed with them, but their words burned like acid. Nights grew colder in his marble bedroom. He and Amaka had prayed for another child for 10 years, but heaven stayed silent. Then came Grace Okoro. Grace was 28, with eyes that never smiled. She worked as the front desk manager in one of Samuel's companies, efficient, polite, and dangerously aware of her beauty. She had grown up in a poor village near Enugu, watching her father die of debt and her mother sell vegetables to survive. She once swore she'd never beg life for anything again. When Grace first saw Chief Samuel walk into the office in his tailored suit and diamond watch, she saw not a man but a door. Power, wealth, name, everything she wanted lived behind it. She began to study him like a project, his routine, his favorite food, even the way he smiled when praised. She started working late, always accidentally being the last person in the office. She brought him coffee before meetings, learned to compliment his ideas at just the right moment, and slowly wrapped herself in the silk of his attention. For months, Samuel resisted. His faithfulness to Amaka had been his pride, but pride bends easily under loneliness. One rainy night, as thunder rolled across Lagos, Grace appeared in his office with a tray of hot food. "Sir," she said softly, "you've worked since morning. Let me take care of you just for tonight." He should have sent her away. Instead, he let her in. That night, the empire's foundation cracked. 3 weeks later, Grace appeared at his door, her voice trembling, her eyes glistening. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. Samuel's heart stopped. The word pregnant echoed like a curse and a miracle all at once. He thought of Amaka's empty womb, the endless prayers unanswered. "It's a boy," Grace said confidently, though she could not have known. "God has blessed you again." For the first time in his life, Samuel didn't know if he should pray or hide. The next days were sleepless. He avoided Amaka's eyes, spoke less at dinner, drowned himself in work. Finally, guilt broke him. That Thursday evening, rain hammered the roof of their mansion, drowning the sound of his trembling voice. "Amaka," he began, "there's something I must tell you." She looked up from her book, smiling softly. "What is it, my love?" He couldn't meet her gaze. "One of my employees? Grace. She's pregnant. With my child." The words struck like lightning. The book fell from Amaka's hands. Her throat tightened. The world blurred. "Grace," she whispered. "The girl who serves you tea at the office." Her voice cracked, thin and shaking. "You're going to marry her, aren't you?" Samuel's silence was the only answer she needed. That night, she didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She simply wept quietly, endlessly, until her pillow drowned. And when morning came, she did what few women could. She rose, wrapped her pain in dignity, and said, "If this is what God has decided, I will not curse him. But no woman will ever take my son's place in your heart." 3 months later, Grace moved into the Adeyemi mansion. The world whispered, but Samuel ignored them. He believed wealth could buy peace, that time could heal betrayal. But even diamonds cannot hide poison. Grace, now glowing with pregnancy, filled the house with her sweet voice and sweeter lies. Servants bowed, guests praised her, and Samuel smiled, blind to the storm building beneath his roof. Tunde, only 10 then, had never known cruelty until Grace arrived. At first she smiled at him, bringing gifts, calling him my little prince. But one afternoon when Amaka wasn't home, he dropped a glass cup by mistake. Grace's eyes turned cold. "You clumsy child," she hissed, striking his hand so hard he cried. Later, when Amaka returned, Grace's tone was syrup again. "He's such a lovely boy, though a little careless," she said sweetly. Amaka noticed the shift, the smiles that didn't reach Grace's eyes, the way servants stopped greeting her as warmly. Something dark had entered her home. When Grace gave birth to twin boys, David and Ben, the mansion filled with celebration. Drums beat, champagne flowed, relatives danced. But Amaka felt the first tremor of an ending. Grace's face, glowing in candlelight, turned toward her and whispered, "Now the Adeyemi line is secure." Tunde watched from the stairs as his father kissed Grace's forehead. He didn't understand why his mother's eyes were wet. That night, Amaka hugged him tighter than ever. "Mama, why are you crying?" he asked. She smiled faintly, brushing his cheek. "Because some prayers come with pain, my son. But you," she paused, "you must never let hate live in your heart." In the weeks that followed, Grace's poison took root. When Chief Samuel was away, she began ordering the staff not to serve Tunde at the main table. "Let him eat in the kitchen," she said casually. "He's almost grown, he must learn humility." Servants obeyed. Lagos houses whisper through walls and rumors travel faster than cars. Soon, even the gatekeeper called the boy small master without respect. But every night, Amaka knelt by Tunde's bed, praying softly over him. "Lord, keep my son pure, even in a wicked house." Grace's hatred festered. She wanted more than Samuel's ring. She wanted power complete and eternal. And standing between her and that throne was a gentle boy with his mother's eyes. So one night, as thunder rolled once again across Lagos, Grace picked up her phone and dialed a number she had not called in years. A woman answered, her voice rough like gravel. "Funmi speaking." Sister Grace whispered, "I need your help." The line went silent, then came the question that would change everything. "Do you want her gone or destroyed?" Grace looked out the window where Amaka's laughter echoed faintly from the garden, and her lips curved into something. "Wicked," both she said. Outside, lightning carved the sky in half. The following weeks moved like a slow poison through the Adeyemi mansion. To outsiders, everything glittered: the laughter of guests, the shining marble floors, the golden portraits of Chief Samuel's expanding empire. But under that luxury, Grace Okoro's plan grew like a shadow that no one could touch. She had what she wanted: the title of second wife, the admiration of society, women, and twin sons who now occupied every corner of Samuel's heart. Amaka remained graceful, even as her world shrank. She moved through the halls like a ghost, praying softly under her breath. Servants who once bowed deeply now offered lazy nods. The cooks forgot her orders. Even the driver hesitated when she asked to visit her church. Grace had poisoned the air with whispered words. "Madam Amaka has gone weak. The chief wants peace. Let her fade quietly." One evening, Amaka stood by the window watching the garden she had planted with Tunde. Her hibiscus still bloomed red as spilled heart. She turned as her son entered, 10 years old, dressed neatly for school, his eyes heavy with questions, too old for his age. "Mama," he said, "why does Auntie Grace never smile at me anymore?" Amaka knelt, holding his face gently. "Some people smile only when they win, my love," she whispered. "But winning doesn't mean they are happy." She kissed his forehead. "Promise me one thing, never let cruelty teach you how to hate." Tunde nodded solemnly, but his small fists clenched. He didn't yet understand hate, but he felt its chill in every corner of the house. Meanwhile, Grace grew restless. Her sons were only 6 months old, yet she already feared the shadow of Tunde's inheritance. In Nigerian culture, the first son, regardless of his mother, carried the father's legacy. It haunted her. What if Samuel died tomorrow? Would Tunde inherit everything? Would her twins be left to beg? That thought burned her night and day. One night, Grace sat in her lavish new bedroom, silk curtains swaying with the wind. Her sister Funmi's name glowed on her phone screen. She hesitated, then pressed call. "Sister, it's me," she whispered. The voice that came through was sharp and low like metal scraping stone. "I knew you'd call someday," Funmi said. "Rich women always think they're safe until they aren't." Grace swallowed. "It's not me I need help with. It's the other woman. My husband's first wife. What about her? I want her gone. Forever. She stands in my way. Her son too." A long silence followed. Then Funmi said, "Send me something that carries her soul, hair, clothes, anything that has touched her. I'll do the rest." Grace's hand trembled as she ended the call. She went to Amaka's room later that night under the pretense of bringing food. While Amaka slept, Grace quietly took her hairbrush from the vanity table. A few long strands clung to its bristles, black and shining. She placed it in a small plastic bag, sealing Amaka's fate. 2 days later, she sent the package with a courier along with an envelope of cash. "Do it quietly," she wrote. Within a week, the curse began. Amaka woke one morning with a strange dizziness. Her fingers trembled when she tried to lift her tea. By noon, her skin felt like fire. "Maybe I'm just tired," she murmured. But the next day, her legs buckled as she tried to stand. Samuel came home to find her pale and shaking on the couch. "You should see a doctor," he said, more irritated than worried. "I'll be fine," she whispered. But she wasn't. The following days blurred into nights of pain. Doctors from the best hospitals in Lagos came and went confused. "Her tests are normal," they said. "There's no medical reason for her condition." Grace watched from the hallway, pretending concern. "Oh, my poor sister," she said to the servants, dabbing fake tears. But in her room, she smiled into her mirror. "It's working." Tunde began spending every moment at his mother's bedside. He brought her books, water, and jokes, though his voice often cracked. "Mama, you'll get better," he said, trying to sound brave. Amaka touched his cheek, her fingers frail as paper. "If my body fails, my love will not," she whispered. Meanwhile, Grace continued to poison Samuel's mind. "Chief," she said one night as they ate dinner, "I dreamed of dark spirits around Amaka's room. Maybe her illness isn't natural. The ancestors are warning us." Samuel, superstitious by upbringing, frowned. "What should we do?" "Send her home," Grace replied softly. "Her people will know how to cleanse her spirit. The city brings bad energy." He hesitated. "She's my wife." Grace leaned closer. "You have children to protect. The twins need peace, not sickness hovering around." That night, Samuel lay awake, the sound of rain whispering against the roof. His guilt battled his fear. By dawn, fear had won. When the car arrived the next morning, Amaka sat quietly wrapped in a faded shawl. Her skin was pale, her hair thin. Samuel stood at the doorway, avoiding her eyes. "You'll stay with your parents until you recover," he said. Amaka's heart broke. "Please don't send me away from my son," she whispered. "Grace will take care of him. No one will love him like I do." Her words fell into silence. As the driver carried her weak body toward the car, Tunde ran barefoot down the stairs, tears streaking his cheeks. "Mama, don't go. Take me with you." She turned, summoning her last strength to cup his face. "My son, be strong. When I get better, I'll come back. Remember, kindness is stronger than evil." The car door closed. Rain began to fall again, soft at first, then harder, until the whole street shimmered with tears. Tunde chased after the car until his legs gave out, his voice swallowed by thunder. "Mama!" From the balcony, Grace held her twins, watching with a thin smile. "Look, my sons," she murmured. "Now you are the only heirs." That night, silence replaced Amaka's gentle laughter in the house. The scent of her jasmine perfume faded from the halls. Samuel busied himself with work, burying his guilt under paperwork and whiskey. Tunde ate alone, slept alone, and learned that love could vanish without warning. But one thing refused to die: the memory of his mother's voice. In the small hours of the night when the house was quiet, he whispered her words to himself. "Be strong, stay kind." He didn't know those words would one day save his life. Grace thought she had won, but fate, like a silent judge, had already written another ending in the thunderclouds above Lagos. Months passed since Amaka's departure, and though her absence was meant to bring peace, the Adeyemi mansion had never felt more haunted. Every corner whispered her name. The roses she planted began to wilt, the air grew colder, and even the servants avoided her old room, as if something invisible lingered there. Tunde, now a lonely 10-year-old, carried her memory like a secret prayer. Each night, he pressed his hands together and whispered, "Mama, please come back." But Grace's plan was far from complete. In her bedroom, she sat before her vanity mirror, brushing her long hair as thunder rolled outside. The twins slept soundly in their cribs beside her. The only light came from a flickering candle, its flame bending like it knew fear. She picked up her phone and dialed Funmi's number. "It's working," she whispered. "The woman is gone, but I need more." On the other end, her sister's voice was slow and snake-like. "You've already won, Grace." "Why call again?" "Because her son still breathes." Funmi chuckled low and cruel. "He's a child. He's the heir," Grace spat. "As long as Tunde lives, my boys will never be safe." Silence stretched for a moment before Funmi said, "You've already used my medicine once. The ancestors demand payment for another." "Money, no. Something deeper. Blood or loyalty." Grace hesitated. "What does that mean?" "Swear by your soul that you'll never speak the truth of what you've done. Not even on your deathbed. If you break it, your punishment will find you even beyond the grave." Grace's hands trembled. Lightning flashed across her mirror, painting her face ghost white. But ambition drowned out fear. "I swear," she said. "Just tell me how to end the boy. Find someone desperate." Funmi replied, "A man who needs money more than he needs his soul." The line went dead. 2 days later, Grace found him. His name was Mr. Afe, the family's driver, a quiet man with 6 children and an aging mother in the village. His salary barely paid for food. Grace called him to her office, smiling softly. "Mr. Afe, you've served us well," she said, placing an envelope on the table. The sight of cash peeked from the corner, thick, heavy, irresistible. "I have a job for you," he hesitated. "Madam, I already drive Chief to meetings, not for him, for me." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Next Thursday, when you take Tunde to his computer class, you will take a different route, a lonely road near 3rd Mainland Bridge. Then you will lose control of the car. There will be an accident." Efe's eyes widened. "An accident?" "Yes." She smiled. "It must look real. The boy must not survive." He stepped back as if struck. "Madam, he's only a child." "Then think of your own children," she hissed. "If you refuse, you lose this job, and they go hungry." She slid the envelope toward him. 2 million naira, enough to feed your family for years. Efe looked at the money, his soul tearing between hunger and horror. He left without answering. But the devil does not beg twice. The night before the plan, Efe knelt beside his bed, weeping into his hands. His wife touched his shoulder. "What troubles you?" He couldn't tell her. He only whispered, "Pray for me tomorrow." The next morning dawned gray and heavy. Tunde rolled out of bed, eager for his computer class, the only part of his week that made him feel free. When Efe picked him up, the boy smiled. "Good morning, uncle. You look tired." "I'm fine," the driver muttered. His hands shook on the steering wheel. As they drove through the city, rain began to fall, first as a drizzle, then as a downpour that blurred the world into streaks of silver. The wipers groaned across the windshield. At the sharp curve near the bridge, Efe's heart pounded like drums in his chest. He saw the tree ahead, the one he was supposed to hit. His mind screamed, now or never. But then he looked at the boy beside him, small, polite, innocent, holding a notebook full of drawings. "When I grow up," Tunde said softly, "I'll build computers that help people walk again. Maybe even my mother." The words broke Efe. Tears filled his eyes. He gripped the wheel and whispered, "Forgive me, child." At the last second, he turned hard to protect Tunde's side. The car skidded, crashed into the tree with a thunderous bang, and everything went dark. When the world returned, Efe was bleeding but alive. Tunde was unconscious, trapped under the twisted metal. His small legs bent unnaturally. Efe crawled out, dragging the boy free, just as smoke rose from the engine. People rushed from nearby stalls, shouting, "Call an ambulance." Grace received the news 2 hours later. She rushed to the hospital, tears streaming down her face, a perfect act. "My poor Tunde," she wailed before the nurses clutching her chest. But inside, her heart danced. When the doctor came out, his face was grim. "The boy survived," he said. Grace's smile faltered. "But his spinal cord is severely damaged. He will never walk again." Her false tears returned, glistening like diamonds. "Oh no," she murmured, pressing a hand to her lips. But deep inside, she whispered, "Perfect." Tunde awoke 2 days later, pain burning through every nerve. He tried to move his legs. Nothing happened. His eyes filled with terror. "Doctor, I can't feel my feet." The doctor sighed heavily. "Son, I'm sorry. Your legs were badly injured. You won't be able to walk again." The words stabbed deeper than any knife. For weeks, he refused to speak. He stared out the hospital window, watching rain drip down the glass. The boy who once dreamed of building machines that walk now couldn't stand. When Chief Samuel finally visited, his eyes held more shame than love. He stood by the door, not daring to come closer. "Be strong," he said stiffly. "You'll be fine." But even as he spoke, he could not hide the disgust twisting in his face. Grace placed a hand on his shoulder. "At least the boy is alive," she murmured sweetly. "We must accept God's will." God's will. Those words cut deeper than the accident itself. A month later, Tunde was brought home in a wheelchair. The house that once echoed with laughter now hummed with silence. Grace instructed the servants not to help him. "Let him learn independence," she said coldly. "Disabled people must be strong." When Samuel walked by and saw his son struggling to lift a cup, he turned away. In his heart, a cruel thought whispered, "A cripple cannot lead the Adeyemi name." Tunde tried to stay brave. Every night he whispered to the sky, "Mama, I will make you proud." But loneliness weighed heavier than his useless legs. In the servants' quarters, Efe sat alone, unable to sleep. Guilt consumed him. He had saved the boy's life but also destroyed it. Finally, he packed his bag, left a note for Chief Samuel, and disappeared from Lagos forever. Grace barely noticed his absence. She was too busy feeding Samuel new lies. "Chief," she said one evening, "have you noticed how business slowed since the boy's accident? People say your house is cursed." "Cursed," Samuel repeated. "Yes, maybe the spirits are angry. Maybe Tunde's presence keeps bad luck close." He didn't answer, but his silence was enough. The seed was planted. Outside in the heavy night rain, a single voice whispered from Tunde's room. It was his mother's in his dreams. "Your pain is not your end, my son. It is your beginning." The thunder rolled again, carrying that promise through the walls of the mansion that had forgotten its heart. The first morning after returning home, Tunde sat by the window of his old bedroom, staring into the garden that once smelled of hibiscus and mango blossoms. He could still hear echoes of his mother's laughter there, the way she used to call him "my sunshine" as they planted flowers together. But now, weeds had claimed the garden. Grace had ordered the gardener to stop tending it. "No need to waste time on the dead woman's plants," she had said. Those words sank deep into Tunde's chest, even though he wasn't supposed to hear them. His world had become smaller. The bright halls of the Adeyemi mansion, once filled with footsteps and laughter, were now long corridors of shame. Each time his wheelchair squeaked across the marble floor, someone's whisper followed. "Poor boy. A curse on the family. God forbid my child ends like that." The servants no longer made eye contact. Grace had made sure of that. She told them helping him was against the chief's wishes. "Let him manage himself," she said, her voice coated in false sweetness. "It will make him strong." But she didn't mean strength. She meant humiliation. The cruelest moment came 3 weeks later. Chief Samuel had thrown a lavish party to celebrate a new oil contract. The mansion was glittering with guests. Powerful men, polished women in sequin dresses, music loud enough to drown the heart. Tunde sat upstairs, forgotten, listening to the echo of laughter floating from below. When he tried to wheel himself to the balcony to watch, one of the maids blocked him. "Madam said you must stay in your room," she whispered. "Why?" Tunde asked quietly. She said, "People might be uncomfortable seeing you like this." The words stabbed deeper than his broken spine. He nodded, forcing a smile that cracked as soon as she left. He turned to the mirror, staring at his reflection, a boy of 15, his legs thin and motionless eyes older than they should be. "I am still me," he whispered. "I'm still Tunde." Downstairs, Grace laughed loudest among the guests. When someone asked where the chief's eldest son was, she smiled faintly and said, "He's resting. He doesn't like crowds anymore." Chief Samuel said nothing. Deep down, he felt the sting of guilt, but he silenced it with pride and wine. It was easier to forget than to feel. That night, Tunde overheard something that shattered the last bit of his hope. He was rolling down the hallway to get water when he heard voices coming from the study. His father's deep-toned, tired, bitter, and Grace's smooth whisper behind it. "Samuel, the boy's condition is bad luck," she said. "Ever since the accident, your contracts are falling apart. Clients gossip. Some even say God cursed you for keeping him here." "Grace, he's my son," Samuel muttered. "Your crippled son," she corrected softly. "Be honest. Do you see how people look at you now? You think they'll respect a man who lets weakness sit under his roof?" Silence. Then the sound of whiskey being poured. Grace pressed on. "If you love him, set him free. Let him live with his mother's people. They can take care of him. It will give this house peace again." When Samuel didn't respond, she touched his arm, her voice turning to velvet. "You deserve peace, my love. For you, for our boys." From the hallway, Tunde's world tilted. The pain in his chest burned hotter than the scars on his back. He turned his wheelchair slowly, careful not to make a sound. Back in his room, he wept quietly, biting the blanket to keep from crying out loud. Days passed like ghosts. Every morning he tried to find reasons to stay brave, reading books his mother left behind, teaching himself small things on an old laptop, fixing broken radios just to prove his hands still worked. But the loneliness was suffocating. His father rarely spoke to him anymore. David and Ben avoided him completely, giggling when they saw him struggle to reach a shelf or drop a spoon. One afternoon, while Grace's twins played football in the garden, Tunde watched from his window. Their laughter filled the air, a cruel reminder of what he'd lost. He closed his eyes and remembered the last time he'd run barefoot on that same grass. The wind in his face, the sun on his neck, freedom. The memory hurt more than his spine ever did. That night, the storm returned, the kind that rattled the windows and made even the servants whisper prayers. Grace stood by the fireplace, holding a glass of wine. "He's too quiet lately," she told Samuel. "It's unsettling." Samuel frowned. "He's not a threat. He's just broken." Grace smiled faintly. "Broken things attract pity. Pity weakens kings." Those words lingered in Samuel's mind like a curse. By morning, he had made up his mind. He called Tunde into his office, the one room still filled with symbols of his power-polished mahogany gold awards and a massive portrait of himself on the wall. Tunde rolled in slowly, unsure. "Papa, you wanted to see me?" Samuel didn't look up. His voice was heavy, distant. "Pack your things." Tunde blinked. "Why?" "You'll be leaving tomorrow." The air vanished from the room. "Leaving where? Back to your mother's village," Samuel said flatly. "You'll live better there." "This house isn't suited for you anymore." Tunde's breath hitched. "Papa, please," he whispered. "This is my home." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Not anymore. Don't make this harder than it is." Tunde's eyes filled with tears. "How can you send me away like garbage?" Samuel finally looked up, his gaze like stone. "Because I can't carry a son who can't walk into my future." The words shattered something inside the boy that would never heal again. That night, Tunde didn't sleep. He sat awake staring at his small suitcase, the only thing he'd be allowed to take. 2 shirts, 1 book, a picture of his mother holding him as a baby. At dawn, the driver loaded his bags into the car. None of his family came to say goodbye. Grace stood by the window sipping tea, smiling faintly. Her twins played with toy cars on the floor. Tunde rolled out the front door himself, the wheels cutting small grooves in the wet earth. He looked back once, hoping foolishly that his father might appear in the doorway. But the mansion stood still, silent, indifferent. As the car carried him away, Lagos swallowed him, the roar of traffic, the honking horns, the blur of colors and dust. He watched the city pass like a stranger watching someone else's life. At the bus station, the driver handed him a small envelope. "From Madam Grace," he said. Inside were a few crumpled Naira notes, not enough for a room, barely enough for food. He laughed bitterly. She even prices pity. By sunset, Tunde sat alone at a crowded intersection, his wheelchair beside a broken wall. The air smelled of exhaust and roasted corn. People walked past him as if he were invisible. For the first time in his life, he had nothing, no family, no home, no legs to carry him anywhere. Only the echo of his mother's voice remained. "Be strong. Stay kind." He lifted his head toward the darkening sky. "Mama," he whispered, "I will survive, even if it kills me." Thunder rolled over Lagos once more, not as punishment, but as witness. The sun over Lagos felt different when you had nowhere to go. It burned not like warmth, but like judgment. A reminder that the world kept moving even when your life had stopped. Tunde sat by a cracked wall at Ojuelegba Junction, the same place where beggars fought for space and preachers shouted about salvation no one could afford. His wheelchair squeaked each time he shifted his weight. His palms ached from pushing himself over potholes. By noon, the city noise had turned into a heavy blur of horns, shouts, and the hiss of frying oil. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The 10,000 Naira Grace had left him was almost gone, most spent on transport and a cheap loaf of bread. Every passerby seemed in a hurry, eyes sliding over him like he didn't exist. At one point, a group of schoolboys passed, their laughter sharp as broken glass. "See the cripple boy," one of them whispered in Yoruba. "Maybe God forgot his legs." They burst out laughing, running away before Tunde could even look up. He clenched his fists, the old pain crawling up his spine again. For a moment, anger surged, a flash of fire that told him to curse the world, to hate God, to hate everyone who had turned away. But then his mother's voice drifted back, soft as a lullaby. "Don't let cruelty teach you how to hate." So instead of shouting, he whispered, "I'll prove you wrong. All of you. As night began to fall, the traffic lights blinked lazily over the chaos. The smell of roasted corn mixed with dust and gasoline. Just when he thought he would faint from hunger, a gentle voice spoke beside him. "Young man, you look lost." He turned his head slowly. It was an old woman, dark-skinned, wrapped in a colorful Ankara scarf. Her tray of oranges balanced on her head. Her eyes were kind, but knowing the kind that had seen both pain and hope. "I need a place to stay," Tunde said weakly. His throat was dry. She looked him over, noticing the wheelchair, the thin frame, the torn shoes tied to his footrests. "You don't have family, they sent me away." The woman sighed. "The world can be wicked, but not everyone in it is." She made a few phone calls on a small Nokia phone. After several minutes, she nodded. "Come. My friend has a small room in Mushin. Not fancy, but safe enough." Tunde followed her through narrow streets lined with street vendors and dim lamps that flickered like tired stars. Children ran barefoot through puddles. Radios played old high-life songs. Finally, they reached a single-story building with cracked paint and a tin roof that whistled with the wind. "This will be yours," she said. The room was barely large enough for his wheelchair. The walls were stained, the window broken, and the floor smelled of damp wood. But to Tunde, it was freedom, the first thing no one could take from him. "I don't have money to pay you yet," he murmured. The woman smiled. "You will. My name is Mama Ngozi. God will bless you." She placed a bag of oranges beside him. "Eat, rest, and remember, life turns, my son. It always turns." That night, Tunde ate 2 oranges and cried until dawn. Not just for hunger or pain, but for the strange kindness of a stranger when his own family had thrown him away. Days turned into weeks. Lagos had no mercy, but it had rhythm, a rhythm Tunde learned to move with. In the mornings, he rolled to the roadside and offered to fix radios or chargers. "Cheap repairs," he called out, his voice echoing over honking buses. At first, no one trusted him. Some mocked him openly. "A cripple fixing phones, he'll break them worse." Others just stared with pity and walked away. Still, he persisted. Every night he studied on the second-hand laptop he had bought with his last few naira. It was slow, its screen cracked, but it worked. He watched tutorials on YouTube reading about circuits, software, and programming. When the power went out, which happened often, he lit a candle and continued typing, sweat running down his face. "Mama," he whispered one night, staring at the blue glow of his screen, "I will make something of this pain." Slowly, things began to change. One afternoon, a taxi driver brought him a broken phone. "They said you fix things," the driver said doubtfully. "But if you break it, I'll come back for your wheels." Tunde smiled faintly. "Fair deal." He worked quietly for 20 minutes, fingers flying over wires and tiny screws. When he handed the phone back, the screen lit up instantly. The driver's eyes widened. "You're a miracle," he shouted. "My wife's been crying for that phone." The next day, 2 more drivers came. Then a woman selling jewelry. Then a young man from a printing shop. By the end of the month, the boy who fixes anything had become a whispered name around Mushin. He didn't earn much, just enough for food, rent, and the occasional new shirt, but each naira felt like victory. One evening, Mama Ngozi visited him. "You're working too hard, my son," she said, bringing him a plate of rice. Tunde smiled. "Work is all I have, Mama." She sat beside him, watching as he soldered a small circuit board. "No, my son," she said softly. "You have more than that. You have purpose. Pain shapes people, but only if they let it." Her words stayed with him. That night, while the rain tapped on the tin roof, Tunde stared at his laptop and whispered to himself, "Maybe this isn't the end of my story. Maybe it's the beginning." He began to dream bigger. What if he could create something more than repairs? What if he could build systems, apps, ideas that changed lives, especially for those who, like him, had been told they were useless? So he taught himself programming languages, Python, Java, C++. He didn't always understand everything, but he never stopped trying. When the laptop froze, he fixed it. When he couldn't afford internet, he walked miles to cyber cafes, paying with coins. 3 years passed. Tunde was now 21. His arms were stronger from pushing his wheelchair. His eyes were tired but bright. His tiny shop had become a refuge for locals, a place where broken phones and broken hearts came to heal. One morning, a sleek car stopped outside. A man in a fine suit stepped out holding a silver laptop. "Are you the one they call Tunde Tech?" Tunde blinked. "That's me. My name is Mr. Paul. I work for Central Heritage Bank. My laptop crashed. Important files worth millions of naira are stuck inside. Everyone says they're gone forever. Can you help?" Tunde wheeled closer, examining the laptop. "Give me 2 days," he said. Mr. Paul frowned. I can pay 50,000 if you succeed. Then you'll get your files, Tunde said confidently. For 2 sleepless nights, he worked barely eating. On the second morning, the laptop finally beeped and every file appeared. But while scanning the system, Tunde found something strange, a hidden virus sending data to an unknown server. He traced it back to the bank's core system. Someone was trying to steal millions. When Mr. Paul returned, Tunde showed him everything. Your files are safe, he said, but someone inside your system isn't. Mr. Paul turned pale. Are you sure? Tunde nodded. I can prove it. That same afternoon, the bank's senior executives arrived at his tiny shop. They crowded around his old laptop as he explained everything in calm, precise words. When he finished, the room was silent. The IT manager wiped sweat from his forehead. You saved us, he muttered. The bank manager leaned forward. Young man, do you want a job? Tunde smiled. No, sir. I want a partnership. Let me build your new security system from my own company. They exchanged astonished looks. You have a company. I will today, Tunde said. The manager laughed, but not mockingly. You're bold. I like that. How much do you need to start? 2 million naira, Tunde replied without blinking. Done, the man said, shaking his hand. And just like that, the boy who once had nothing began building an empire from a wheelchair and a dream. That night, Tunde looked up at the cracked ceiling of his small room and whispered, Mama, it's working. The world tried to break me, but it only sharpened my soul. Outside, Lagos glowed under a restless sky, loud, merciless, but alive. And for the first time, so was he. Lagos had seen many miracles, men rising from dust to diamonds, but none like Tunde Adeyemi. Within months of signing that first contract, his small one-room workshop transformed into an office with 3 assistants, 2 computers, and a plastic signboard that read Tunde Tech Systems. The people of Mushin now looked at him differently. The same neighbors who once mocked his wheelchair now greeted him with respect. Children ran to open his door every morning shouting, Uncle Tunde is back! But Tunde didn't chase fame. He chased purpose. Every sunrise found him already at work, coding, testing, fixing, improving. He built a security system for Central Heritage Bank so strong that even hackers abroad couldn't breach it. When the system launched, the bank's profits soared, and the newspapers began whispering about the young man in a wheelchair who outsmarted Lagos. 2 months later, 3 other banks reached out, then 5. Within half a year, Tunde Tech Systems had contracts across Nigeria. His name became a quiet legend in tech circles, his calm confidence commanding boardrooms filled with men twice his age. Yet amid all the growth, one thing never changed: Tunde's humility. He still visited the orange stall where Mama Ngozi sold fruits, slipping envelopes of money into her bag when she wasn't looking. God bless you, my son, she would say, pretending not to notice. Your light will never fade. But behind every light, a shadow waited. For Grace and Chief Samuel's life had taken a cruel turn. The Adeyemi empire was crumbling. Samuel's oil business, once untouchable, began losing clients. Corruption scandals and failed deals drained his fortune. The banks demanded repayment, and Samuel, too proud to ask for help, mortgaged the mansion. Grace's smile faded along with her wealth. She had spent years controlling everyone around her, but now life refused to obey. Her twins David and Ben had grown into spoiled, reckless men. David gambled. Ben lived for parties. They fought over money, crashed expensive cars, and humiliated their father in public. This is your doing, Samuel barked one night. You raised them without discipline. Grace's face hardened. You made them this way. You threw away the good son and kept the foolish ones. Her words hung in the air, sharp, almost prophetic. But neither knew that somewhere in the same city, the good son had just made his first million. Tunde rented a modest apartment in Ikeja near his new office. Every wall was covered in handwritten notes, ideas for apps, business models, codes, scribbled in blue ink. He had no luxury, no cars, no suits, just a dream and a heartbeat that refused to slow down. When one of his engineers asked why he still worked long after midnight, Tunde smiled. Because I'm not building for money, he said. I'm building for meaning. He began developing software that could help ordinary people, apps for small traders, to track savings for children, to learn basic coding for farmers, to sell goods directly to markets. If I could learn in a room with no light, he said in interviews, then anyone can. In time, his company attracted attention beyond Nigeria. Journalists from Ghana, Kenya, even South Africa came to interview him. They always asked the same question, what drives you? He always gave the same answer, pain and what I chose to do with it. By the time he turned 25, Tunde Tech Systems had grown into one of West Africa's fastest rising software firms. International investors came knocking. Tech giants like Google and Apple requested meetings. When an American company offered to buy his firm for $50 million, his employees cheered, but Tunde quietly shook his head. "I didn't start this to sell it," he said. "I started it to build something Africa can own." His refusal made headlines. "The boy who said no to 50 million, one paper called him. Others said he was crazy. But Tunde didn't mind. He had another dream. He launched the Hope Foundation, an initiative to train people with disabilities in technology. In its first year, he donated over 100 wheelchairs and built computer labs in poor schools. When journalists asked why, he said softly, "Because someone once looked at me and saw nothing. I want to make sure no one else feels that invisible again." His story began to travel across the world, speeches at universities, articles in international magazines, a feature on CNN titled "The Boy Who Turned Pain into Power." But through all the noise, one question haunted him. What happened to Mama? He hired investigators to search every corner of Nigeria. For years, there was no trace. Until one morning, an email arrived, subject line, "We found her." Tunde froze. The report attached detailed everything. A small village near Enugu, a frail woman living alone in a collapsing hut. Locals called her Madam Amaka, the sick one. She'd been ill for nearly 2 decades, barely surviving by selling fruits and herbs. Tunde's hands trembled as he read. "She's alive," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "She's alive." He canceled all his meetings and called his driver. "Get the car ready. We leave now." The convoy reached the village by dusk. Dust rose from the tires as luxury SUVs rolled through narrow roads. Children stopped playing, staring at the strange sight, armed guards, black vehicles, a young man in a wheelchair dressed in crisp white. When Tunde's car stopped outside a mud hut, the world seemed to hold its breath. He wheeled himself toward the door, heart pounding. The hut smelled of smoke and old medicine. In the dim light on a straw mat lay a thin woman with hair as gray as ash. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale. But when she opened her eyes and saw him, she gasped. "Tunde." Her voice cracked like a whisper from another world. "Mama," he breathed. "It's me." She tried to sit up, but her arms shook. He rushed forward, lifting her gently. "Don't move, Mama. I've got you." Tears streamed down her face. "You came back. I prayed every day that God would let me see you again before I die." He held her hand tightly. "You won't die, Mama. Not now. I brought doctors, medicine, everything." For the first time in 20 years, mother and son wept in each other's arms. Outside, villagers gathered quietly, whispering in awe. "Is it true?" they asked each other. The rich man in the wheelchair. "He's her son." As the doctors examined Amaka, they discovered traces of toxins in her blood, remnants of the slow poison Grace had sent years before. "She can recover," one doctor said, "but it will take time." Tunde turned to his team. "Do whatever it takes." That night, under a quiet sky full of stars, he sat beside his mother's bed. She looked at him, eyes glistening with pride. "You've become everything I prayed for, my son." He smiled through his tears. "No, Mama. I'm still the boy you raised, just with bigger tools." When he brought her back to Lagos days later, he reserved an entire wing of the best private hospital for her care. Nurses tended to her every need. Flowers filled her room. For the first time in decades, Amaka slept without pain. Every evening, Tunde visited after work, reading to her, telling stories of his journey. When she learned how he built his empire, her eyes shone with both pride and sorrow. "You turned your pain into purpose," she whispered, "but no child should have to suffer like you did." "I know," he said softly. "But maybe God allowed it so I could help others." She smiled faintly. "Then help me forgive your father. Hate only poisons the soul." Tunde looked out the window, the city lights flickering below. "One day, Mama," he said, "when I'm ready." Neither of them knew that day was coming soon, and it would change everything once again. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Lagos hospital suite where Amaka now rested. For the first time in 20 years, she woke without coughing blood. Her cheeks had begun to color again. Her hands, once frail as feathers, could now hold a spoon. The nurses called her Madam Miracle, and when she smiled, the whole ward seemed warmer. Every day, Tunde arrived in his wheelchair, dressed in his simple white shirt's laptop bag slung across his shoulder. He always carried fresh flowers, roses like the ones she used to grow in their old garden. "Mama, you look stronger today," he said one morning, pushing his chair beside her bed. "I feel alive again," Amaka whispered, brushing his cheek. "And I still can't believe it. You've built empires, my son. I saw the news, your company, your speeches. The world calls you Africa's hope." He laughed softly. "The world exaggerates, Mama. I just fix things, computers, systems, lives." she smiled. That's what you always did even as a boy. Then her voice dropped to a tremor. Tell me, Tunde, what happened after I left? How did you survive all those years? The room fell silent, except for the steady rhythm of her heart monitor. Tunde took a long breath, the memories flooding back the loneliness, the streets, the nights he cried, until he had no tears left. I survived because of you, he said finally. Because every time I wanted to give up, I heard your voice telling me to stay kind, and I swore that if I ever found you again, I'd make you proud. Amaka's eyes glistened. You already have. Outside, the city roared with life taxis, honking vendors, shouting the hum of 1,000 stories. Yet somewhere else in Lagos, another story was dying. In the crumbling Adeyemi mansion, Chief Samuel sat alone in his study staring at old files that no longer mattered. The walls that once echoed with business calls and laughter now smelled of dust and regret. On the desk lay a stack of unpaid bills, bank letters stamped final notice, and a bottle of whiskey half empty. The empire he'd built brick by brick was gone. Grace's manipulations had hollowed it out. His son's recklessness had finished it. He poured another glass, his hands trembling. How did I get here? Just then Grace's scream echoed from upstairs. Samuel rushed up, his heart pounding. He found her clutching her phone, her face pale. Samuel, she gasped. Turn on the TV. He switched it on. The screen flickered, and there it was, the morning news headline, Africa's youngest tech billionaire Tunde Adeyemi expands Hope Foundation across the continent. A photo appeared, Tunde smiling beside world leaders, a Nigerian flag behind him. Samuel froze. His whiskey glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Tunde, his voice cracked. That's my son. Grace's lips tightened. He's your son, yes, but he's no longer yours. The announcer continued, Mr. Adeyemi's company, Tunde Tech Systems, now works with Google and Microsoft. His foundation provides free education and wheelchairs to thousands. Truly a story of resilience. Samuel sank into a chair, face buried in his palms. I threw him out, he whispered. My own blood. Grace turned away, but her reflection in the window was ghost pale. That night, she dreamed of fire, of Amaka's eyes glowing in the dark, whispering, the innocent rise, the guilty burn. Over the next weeks, fate began to collect its debts. David, the older twin, now 25, had developed a gambling addiction that swallowed everything he touched. He pawned jewelry, forged his father's signature, even sold company shares to pay his debts. When the loan sharks came for him, he ran, but Lagos has a way of finding its sinners. One night, they cornered him outside a casino. He never came home. Ben, the younger twin, drowned his grief in drugs. He started with pills to stay awake for work, then stronger things to stay numb. His brilliant legal career crumbled. His license was revoked. Soon he was just another shadow in the nightclubs of Victoria Island, selling what little he had left to feed his addiction. Grace's perfect life collapsed faster than she could lie. The mansion grew quieter each day, no laughter, no servants, no parties. The creditors took the cars, the jewelry, even her silk curtains. Only her bitterness stayed, and then karma struck. One rainy afternoon, Grace crossed the street near Balogun Market, distracted by her phone. A black car turned the corner too fast. Screams filled the air, tires screeched, and the world went white. When she woke 3 days later, she was in a hospital bed. The doctor stood over her face, grim. Mrs. Adeyemi, we did everything we could, but your injuries were severe. We had to amputate both legs to save your life. Her scream echoed through the ward, long and raw, the sound of a heart tearing itself apart. The woman who had paid to cripple another now sat broken in the same fate. Meanwhile, Tunde's company kept growing. But despite his success, his nights were still haunted. He couldn't forget his father's face, stern, cold, unloving. He told himself he'd moved on, but forgiveness is a wound that heals slowly. One afternoon, his assistant entered his office. Sir, there's someone here to see you, she said softly. Who he says his name is Chief Samuel Adeyemi? Tunde's heart stopped. The name hit like thunder. He hesitated, then nodded. Let him in. The door opened. Time seemed to slow. His father walked in, older, thinner, his once proud shoulders slumped. His eyes were red, his hands trembling as he removed his hat. My son, he began, voice quivering, I came to beg. Tunde's face hardened. Beg for what? For forgiveness. The room filled with silence. For the first time, Samuel looked directly at the wheelchair, the metal reminder of his sins. Grace confessed before she died, he said quietly. She told me everything, the poison, the accident, the lies. I believed her. I believed evil over my own blood. He dropped to his knees. Tunde, I lost everything. My wealth, my sons, my pride. I have nothing left but guilt. Tunde looked at him for a long time. Memories flashed the nights he cried alone, the hunger, the shame, the betrayal. His fists clenched, then loosened. You broke me, Tunde said softly. But breaking me made me strong. Samuel wept. Please, my son, I don't expect your love. I just need peace before I die. Tunde's eyes glistened, his mother's voice whispering in his heart. Forgive him, even if he doesn't deserve it. He sighed. I forgive you, Papa. Samuel looked up, disbelief flooding his face. You do. Yes, Tunde said quietly. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Tears ran freely down both their faces. At that moment the door opened. Amaka entered, now strong enough to walk with help. When Samuel saw her, he gasped as if seeing a ghost. Amaka, you're alive. She nodded calmly. Alive enough to forgive. He fell to his knees again, sobbing. God is merciful. Amaka touched his shoulder gently. He is when we learn too late. Tunde wheeled closer, placing an envelope in his father's hand. There's 500,000 naira inside, he said. Use it to live decently. But don't come back. Our forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. Samuel nodded, trembling. Thank you, my son. Thank you. As he left the hospital, Tunde turned to his mother. Are you at peace now, Mama? She smiled faintly. Peace isn't found in revenge. It's found in release. That night, Tunde stood by his office window looking out over the city lights. His reflection, older, calmer, stared back. Grace took my legs, he murmured, but not my path. Father took my childhood, but not my future. Pain took everything and gave it all back wiser. Outside, thunder rumbled again over Lagos, but this time it sounded like applause. The months that followed the reunion in the hospital carried a stillness that Lagos rarely allowed. For the first time in decades, the Adeyemi story was no longer about war, it was about quiet repair. Every morning, Tunde wheeled into his mother's hospital garden, a book in one hand and warm tea in the other. The nurses loved to watch them, the brilliant son with his soft-spoken mother, sitting under the mango tree like time had chosen to pause for them. Amaka's recovery astonished everyone. The doctors had predicted only partial healing, but her body responded with grace. Within 4 months, she could walk short distances without assistance. You're a miracle, Tunde told her one morning, as she managed 3 full steps on her own. Amaka smiled, breathless. No, my son, you are. I just borrowed some of your strength, he laughed. Then I'll keep lending it to you until we both run out. Her laughter filled the garden, and the sound was like sunlight finding its way through old clouds. But outside that sanctuary, the world was still turning, and it was now turning in Tunde's favor. His company, Tunde Tech Systems, had become the crown jewel of West African technology. The bank contracts had evolved into government partnerships. Newspapers praised him as the genius who changed Africa's tech story. Students quoted him in essays. Motivational speakers told his story on stages across the continent. His words, pain is not the end, it's the training, appeared on billboards beside his foundation's logo, a wheelchair turning into wings. At 28, he was one of the richest men in Nigeria, but also one of the most loved. His humility disarmed cynics. His voice inspired broken souls. He launched free coding schools for disabled youth, built rural computer centers, and donated medical equipment to hospitals. People started calling him the son of second chances. Still, even heroes carry invisible wounds. Late one night, after finishing a meeting with his team, Tunde sat alone in his office, staring out at the glowing skyline. The city's heartbeat thudded faintly below traffic sirens' music. He should have felt fulfilled. Yet something gnawed at him, the image of his father walking away from the hospital, shoulders bent, disappearing into the rain. Forgiveness isn't forgetfulness, he murmured. But how do you live with the ghosts you've forgiven? The question lingered long after the lights went out. Chief Samuel's world, meanwhile, had shrunk to a one-room flat in Ageye, a far cry from his marble palace. He woke each day to the sound of roosters instead of chauffeurs and cooked his meals on a rusty kerosene stove. He lived off the money Tunde had given him, stretching every naira, refusing to gamble it on false pride. Sometimes he would pass by the city billboards and see his son's face staring down, strong, radiant, untouchable. Each time, tears stung his eyes. That boy was mine, he whispered to the empty air, and I threw him away. He wrote letters, long, painful letters to Amaka and Tunde, but never sent them. He feared his words could reopen wounds that forgiveness had barely closed, so he kept them stacked in a wooden box labeled, What I Owe. One Sunday he dressed in his old agbada, ironed as best as he could, and went to church. He sat quietly in the back pew while the pastor preached about redemption. Sometimes the pastor said God allows you to lose everything so you can finally see what was valuable all along. The words pierced Samuel's heart like a spear. He wept quietly, his tears soaking the Bible in his hands. 2 years passed. Grace was long gone, buried beside her sons. The once feared Adeyemi mansion had been auctioned off to developers. Where its golden gates once stood there was now a construction site. Workers shouted, machines roared, and a new building rose from the ruins, a modern rehabilitation center funded by the Hope Foundation. The sign outside read, the Amaka Adeyemi Center for Disabled Children. When Tunde brought his mother to see it on the opening day, she froze her eyes, filling with tears. The building shimmered in white and green, full of ramps, classrooms, and laughter. This was our home once, she whispered. Yes, Tunde said softly. Now it's home to those who need one. Crowds gathered for the ceremony. Reporters filled the courtyard. A group of children in wheelchairs waved flags, chanting Tunde Tunde as he rolled to the stage beside his mother. He spoke simply but powerfully. Life took my legs but gave me wings. Life took my home but gave me purpose. Every pain you survive carries a seed of power. You only need to plant it in hope. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the city like a promise. That night after the event, Amaka sat by the window of their new home, a quiet villa on Banana Island overlooking the water. Do you ever wonder what your father is doing, she asked. Every day, Tunde admitted. You forgave him, but your heart still aches. He nodded. Because forgiveness doesn't erase memory, it only teaches you how to carry it without bleeding. She reached for his hand, then carry it with grace, not grief. A knock came at the door. One of Tunde's assistants entered. Sir, she said softly, there's someone you should see. When Tunde turned his wheelchair, his breath caught. Standing in the doorway was Chief Samuel, older, frailer, but with eyes that finally looked human again. Amaka gasped. Samuel. He bowed deeply. Amaka. Tunde. His voice trembled. I didn't come to stay. I came to thank you for forgiving me when I was unworthy. Tunde's jaw tightened, but he nodded. How are you, Papa Alive? Samuel said. And grateful for every second. I've been volunteering at the church, fixing chairs, cleaning floors. It's not much, but it's honest. Amaka smiled faintly. Service is the best repentance. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. You built a center for the disabled on the land that once cursed you. You turned sin into sanctuary. I don't deserve to be proud of you, but I am. Tunde's throat tightened. For years he had imagined this moment, the apology, the closure, yet now that it was here, words felt small. He reached into his desk and handed his father an envelope. Here, he said quietly. A new job. The center needs a caretaker. Someone who understands what it means to lose everything and start again. Will you take it? Samuel stared at him in disbelief. You'd trust me with that, Tunde smiled faintly. Redemption needs witnesses, Papa. Samuel fell to his knees, sobbing. You are my greatest miracle. No, Tunde said softly. You're part of it. The following months saw the old man sweeping halls, greeting children, tending gardens. Parents visiting the center would often see him pausing by a photo in the main lobby, a framed picture of Tunde as a boy smiling beside Amaka. One afternoon, as he dusted the frame, a young girl in a wheelchair asked, Sir, who's that? Samuel smiled. That's the boy who taught me that forgiveness is freedom. Years later, when Chief Samuel passed quietly in his sleep at 75, the news spread across Lagos. But instead of pity, people spoke of redemption. At his funeral held in the same church he once wept in, hundreds gathered, children from the Hope Foundation, bankers, engineers, neighbors. Tunde spoke briefly, voice steady but soft. My father taught me ambition, but my mother taught me love. Life broke us apart so that forgiveness could build us again. If you remember him, remember not the man he was, but the man he became when grace found him. As the coffin was lowered, Amaka rested her hand on her son's shoulder. You gave him peace, she whispered. And he gave me closure, Tunde replied. They stood together under the wide Lagos sky, the sun setting like gold, melting into the horizon. Somewhere thunder rolled far away, not a warning this time, but a lullaby. The chapter of suffering had ended. The story of legacy had begun. The year after Chief Samuel's passing marked a new dawn for the Adeyemi name, not one built on wealth or power, but on redemption. Lagos, the restless city of noise and neon, now carried whispers of a different kind of empire, the empire of compassion. Everywhere you went, the Hope Foundation's symbol appeared, a pair of hands cradling a wheel that turned into wings. It was painted on schools, printed on buses, and stitched onto the uniforms of smiling children. At the heart of it all stood Tunde and Amaka, not as icons of tragedy, but as living proof that brokenness can bloom. Every morning, Tunde arrived early at the Amaka Adeyemi Center for Disabled Children, the rehabilitation home that had once been his family mansion. The marble staircase where Grace once posed for photographs was now a wheelchair ramp covered in colorful murals, painted by the children themselves. The grand ballroom, once reserved for business galas, had become a classroom where kids learned coding, reading, and art. Uncle Tunde, little voices called whenever his wheelchair rolled in. They would swarm around him, tugging his sleeves, showing off their drawings. He made time for every one of them, a smile, a word of encouragement, a small joke. He knew too well what it meant to feel unseen. One morning he entered the classroom and found a boy struggling with a computer. The screen was frozen. "What's wrong, Chidi?" Tunde asked. The boy frowned. "It won't listen to me." Tunde smiled. "Computers are like people, they only listen when you speak to them kindly." He clicked a few keys and the screen lit up again. The boy's face brightened. "Thank you, sir. You're a magician." Tunde chuckled softly. "No, my boy. Just a man who failed enough times to learn patience." As he left the room, his assistant approached with a tablet. "Sir, CNN just requested another interview," she said. "They want you to speak about your journey and your new programs." He sighed gently. "If they want to talk about hope, yes, but not about money." That evening, as the sun sank behind the Lagos skyline, Tunde wheeled out to the garden, where his mother sat beneath the bougainvillea vines. Amaka had grown older, her hair streaked silver, but her eyes glowed with the calm of a woman who had seen storms and survived them. "Mama," Tunde began sometimes, "I wonder if I'm doing enough. There are so many children still out there, forgotten, hurt, lost." Amaka smiled. "My son, hope isn't a mountain you climb once. It's a road you keep walking. What you build today will guide others long after we're gone." She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "Do you ever miss the past? Only the parts that taught me," he said. "Even the pain, especially the pain." They sat in silence as dusk painted the city gold. A gentle breeze carried laughter from the classrooms nearby, the kind of laughter that heals. A month later, the Hope Foundation hosted its largest charity gala at the Civic Center in Victoria Island. Guests arrived in glittering attire, the press flashing cameras, as if this were a movie premiere. But the star of the night wasn't Tunde's wealth, it was his message. When he rolled onto the stage, the crowd stood and applauded. He waited for the silence, then began. "Good evening, my family," he said, his voice steady and warm. "I call you family because everyone here is part of one truth. We are not defined by what breaks us, but by what we build after the breaking." He paused, scanning the audience. "Years ago, I lost my legs, my home, my father, and nearly my will to live. But God turned that loss into purpose. If you ever find yourself crawling through darkness, remember the tunnel isn't endless, it's just long." Laughter and tears mingled across the hall. Then with a quiet smile, he added, "I dedicate tonight to my mother, who taught me that kindness is the only inheritance that never fades." The spotlight found Amaka in the front row. She pressed her hand to her heart as the audience erupted in applause. By the end of the night, donors pledged over 200 million naira to expand the foundation's work across Africa. But as Tunde left the stage, he whispered to himself, "Money is a tool. Hearts are the real currency." The following morning, Tunde returned to the old bus stop where his life had changed all those years ago. The same corner where an old fruit seller once saved him from the streets. Though the city had modernized, the smell of oranges and dust lingered. He looked around and asked a shopkeeper, "Do you know Mama Ngozi?" The woman smiled. "Of course. She still sells near the junction. Never misses a day." When Tunde wheeled over, he saw her older now, her back bent but her spirit unbroken. "Mama Ngozi," he said softly. She turned, squinting. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then her hands flew to her mouth. "My child, the boy in the chair. You came back," he smiled through tears. "You once said a small kindness can change a life. You were right. Yours changed mine." She shook her head. "No, my son, God changed it. I just offered a chair and a prayer." He pressed an envelope into her hands. "This isn't charity, it's gratitude." When she opened it later, she found documents for a new fruit shop, a spacious stall with a refrigerator, paid rent for 5 years, and a small pension plan in her name. That night she lit a candle and whispered, "Lord, you returned my seat as a forest." Weeks passed and Lagos entered the rainy season. The city smelled of wet earth and renewal. One afternoon, Tunde received an invitation to speak at the United Nations in New York, a historic first for a Nigerian entrepreneur with a disability. His mother clasped his hand as he shared the news. "Go, my son. Tell the world our story, not of pain, but of what came after it." "I will, Mama," he promised. Before leaving for the airport, he wheeled through the corridors of the Hope Center one last time that day. The walls were alive with the sound of children singing a song they had written for him. "We are not broken, we are rising. Wheels of courage keep on turning. Where there was sorrow now, there's song. We are strong, we are strong." Tunde stopped and listened, tears glistening in his eyes. For the first time, he truly felt whole. The UN conference was broadcast worldwide. On the grand stage beneath the bright blue banner of the United Nations, Tunde spoke not of business, but of humanity. "I am not here because I built a company," he said. "I am here because I refuse to let bitterness be my legacy. My legs may have been taken, but my vision walks still for every child who has been told they are less." When he finished, the hall rose in applause. Delegates from 50 nations stood for a young man who had once been invisible on the streets of Lagos. Later that night in his hotel room, overlooking the Hudson River, Tunde called home. Amaka's voice came through soft and proud. "I watched you, my son. You spoke like a prophet." He smiled. "No, Mama. Just your son, the one you taught to turn wounds into windows." Outside, the New York skyline shimmered, but in his heart, it was Lagos that glowed brightest. When Tunde returned to Nigeria weeks later, crowds greeted him at the airport, children waving flags, reporters shouting questions. Yet he rolled past them quietly, heading straight to the Hope Center. He found his mother waiting in the garden, her white headscarf fluttering in the wind. "Welcome home, my son," she said. He looked around at the laughter, the greenery, the rebuilt mansion now filled with joy. "No, Mama," he whispered. "Welcome us home." Above them, the sun broke through the clouds, spreading gold across the courtyard, where his life had once shattered. The light touched the engraved words at the gate, "Where pain ends, hope begins." And for the first time in their long, storm-tossed journey, both mother and son felt the peace of harvest, the soft, eternal kind that grows only from forgiveness. The day Lagos gathered to celebrate 30 years of the Hope Foundation, the city itself seemed to breathe differently. From the island bridges to the inland slums, banners waved with Tunde's emblem, a silver wheel becoming wings, the symbol of every child who had refused to surrender. Newspapers called it the Festival of Hope. Streets were closed, choirs sang, and at the center of it all, a stage had been built in Freedom Park, draped with gold and white. Tunde sat backstage, dressed in a simple black kaftan. His hair had begun to gray at the temples, but his eyes still held the same steady flame that had carried him from hunger to honor. He stared at the sea of faces, thousands of people, some in wheelchairs, some holding phones, some holding hope. For a moment, his heart swelled so much it hurt. "Mama would have loved this," he whispered. Beside him, his assistant smiled. "She's watching, sir. Maybe closer than you think." He nodded slowly. The ache of missing her had softened with time, but never disappeared. 2 years earlier, Amaka had passed peacefully in her sleep, her hand resting on her Bible, a faint smile still on her lips. Tunde had found her that morning and whispered, "Rest now, Mama. You've done enough." Her grave lay beneath a flowering tree behind the Amaka Adeyemi Center, always surrounded by candles and drawings from children she had once cared for. Every morning, Tunde stopped there before work, whispering prayers and promises. Today, however, he felt her presence more vividly than ever, as if the air itself carried her laughter. The ceremony began with music. A choir of children, all from the center, sang a hymn. Tunde had written with them, "We rise not by strength, but by love. We fly though the ground knows our pain, for every tear becomes a river of light, and every fall teaches us how to rise." Again, their voices filled the open air, echoing across the park. People wept quietly, strangers, politicians, laborers, mothers, all bound by something bigger than tragedy. When the song ended, the host stepped forward. "Today we honor not only a man, but a movement. From the streets of Mushin to the halls of the United Nations, from broken bones to rebuilt dreams, please welcome the founder of the Hope Foundation, Mr. Tunde Adeyemi." Thunderous applause shook the park as Tunde wheeled onto the stage. He raised his hand, smiling, waiting for the noise to settle. "Thank you," he began, voice low and full. 30 years ago, I sat alone at a bus stop in Lagos, believing the world had forgotten me. Today, I look at all of you and realize the world was just waiting for us to remember each other." A ripple of laughter and clapping spread through the crowd. He continued, "When I lost my legs, I thought my life was over, but it was only beginning. My father's cruelty, my stepmother's hatred, the streets that mocked me, they all became teachers. They taught me the difference between success and significance. Success is what you keep. Significance is what you give. The crowd cheered again. He looked toward the sky, his expression softening. I stand here because one woman, my mother Amaka, refused to let the world tell me I was worthless. She said kindness is the only inheritance that multiplies. I built this foundation in her name, but I realize now she built it long before I did. In every act of forgiveness, every quiet prayer, every tear she refused to waste. He paused, the wind brushing his face. I forgive because she forgave first, and I rise because she never stopped believing I could. The crowd stood as one, applauding until the sound became like rain. Cameras flashed in across television screens in dozens of countries. People saw a man who had every reason to be bitter smiling instead. Later that afternoon, after the speeches and awards, Tunde asked his driver to take him to the village where everything had begun. The road wound past old markets and new highways until the car stopped by a dusty field, now full of small houses and laughter. The hut where Amaka once lay dying was gone, replaced by a small school painted in bright colors. Above the door, a sign read, Amaka Memorial Primary Knowledge is Healing. Tunde wheeled through the gate as children ran to greet him. The headmistress, a young woman with warm eyes, recognized him instantly. Sir, you honor us, she said. He smiled. No, you honor her. He looked at the children. Your laughter is the sound of her legacy. They led him to the school's backyard where a tree stood tall, the one planted years ago, in his mother's memory. Its leaves shimmered in the sun, and its branches spread wide like arms ready to hold. Tunde sat beneath it for a long while, closing his eyes. The wind rustled through the leaves like a whisper. Be still, my son. You have done well. He felt tears slide down his cheeks. Thank you, Mama, he murmured, for not letting me become like them. For teaching me that forgiveness doesn't mean weakness, it means freedom. Back in Lagos, as dusk fell, the Hope Foundation offices lit up like stars. A young intern named Ayo entered Tunde's office carrying files. Sir, he said nervously, I just wanted to thank you. I grew up in your center. I'm the first in my family to graduate university. My mother always said you gave us back our dignity. Tunde smiled. I didn't give you dignity, Ayo. You were born with it. You just needed someone to remind you. Ayo grinned shyly. We all want to be like you, sir. Tunde's eyes softened. Be better. Build higher. My job was to light the path. Yours is to keep walking. When the young man left, Tunde sat alone in the glow of the city outside his window. He reached for a leather-bound notebook on his desk, the one where he wrote letters he never sent. Tonight he opened to a fresh page and began to write, Dear Mama, the world is loud tonight. They're celebrating what we built, but my heart is quiet because I know it was never just me. Every smile I see carries your reflection. Every child who walks again carries your name. Every man I forgive carries your lesson. You once said the seeds we plant in pain bloom in another season. I think that season has come, and when my time ends, I want to rest beside you under the same tree where forgiveness took root. Your son, always, Tunde. He closed the notebook, his fingers resting on the cover. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, not a storm, but a blessing. Years later, after Tunde's peaceful passing at the age of 70, Nigeria declared a national day of remembrance in his honor. Streets were named after him. Universities opened scholarships bearing his name. But the truest monument was invisible, the countless lives lifted by his compassion. At his burial, thousands gathered under the wide Lagos sky. His wheelchair, polished and empty, stood beside the coffin as a symbol. The choir sang his favorite hymn, and children from the foundation released white balloons that soared high, drifting toward the horizon. One girl, no older than 8, whispered to her friend, Do you think he can see us? Her friend smiled. Of course, people like him never really leave. They just turn into light. As the balloons disappeared into the clouds, the sun broke through, once more golden and steady, shining upon a city forever changed by one man's pain, one mother's faith, and the power of a heart that chose mercy over vengeance. And so the story of Tunde Adeyemi, the boy who was thrown away, the man who built hope from ashes, ended not in tragedy, but in triumph. His name became more than history. It became a prayer whispered by every broken soul who dared to rise again.